So I'm in there now. So we have tonight a recap, debrief of the Joint Finance Committee meeting, followed by our vote to recommend the FY22 school budget to the board. So Javier, I think and Kathy, I think we were going to start with just answers to questions that we got at the Joint Finance Committee meeting. And then I thought maybe the board could just kind of discuss reflections on the Joint Finance Committee meeting and any thoughts about what that means for the vote that we're about to take tonight. And then we'll follow that with a vote to recommend the budget. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Javier and Kathy.
Right. So we have in the board packet, there is a sort of a key document there, which is the last of the attached documents, the memo to the Joint Finance Committee meeting follow-up. So I just want to start by thanking Anne for taking really good notes during that meeting that then allowed us to get ourselves organized and to pull all of this additional documentation together. So what we thought we would do is walk through. I think some of these are, some of the material is obviously material that you've already seen, but some of it is new information that came as a result of those questions. And we thought it would be important for our finance committee to have insight into those questions. So I would suggest you open that document, and then we're going to walk you through. Those. Kathy, I'm assuming you're going to be sharing your screen.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Greg, can you make sure that Kathy has rights?
I think I do. Yeah. Okay. So I'm sharing the memo. Everyone see that?
Probably not very well, but everybody has it. So
okay, good. Okay.
That.
So we're just going to go down through the list. The first item is they had asked for the presentation for the 325 meeting where the Joint Committee reviewed the budget. So that's in there. I can open that up and show you that. I don't think we need to do that, but we can. Okay, that's just a link to the board docs and in the presentation. And then the second item includes FY22 actual ads and FY22 proposed FTE ads. So that is a little schedule that is just showing. Let me click in that. I'm sorry, I forget I'm sharing. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to make that a little bit bigger. So what this was attempting to show is the FY21 approved budget. Any ads that we had during the year, this year, FY21, coming down to what our current staffing is right now. So we had approved 1166.2 FTEs. We had net ads, gives and takes, 0.12 FTE. And we came down to our current staffing, which is 1166.32 FTEs. And then for FY22, we're losing one position to attrition, and the rest of the ads, the 42.2, are actually related to the new investments. And that would give our FY22 proposed staffing at 1207.52. And so in just attempting to make sure that all the schedules tie everything that we've presented in the past, I just wanted to mention that some of the investment schedules showing 42.4 FTEs, and that's because there's a 0.2 nurse FTE that wasn't budgeted for FY21. It was included in the FY21 current staffing. And that's reflected in the 1166 above, just for clarification.
I see Roberto has a question. Roberto?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I guess just to clarify, this slide is answering when the question was raised for us to present just a really plain what is new this year and what's the dollar amount to that, right? Like because I think that question was raised pretty plainly, and that question has come up before. This is what that slide attempts to show, right? Or is this not what we're looking at?
No, this is one part of that. There was a question about that will come soon in the memo. Is what is the sort of just the escalation of costs and what is the cost of the investment? So to break those out and the tax rate implications. This is specifically Mr. Mavadonis asked questions about our staffing, and Kathy is going to next walk through one of the other questions that he asked in that same string of questions, which was how many positions did we add this year as a result of COVID? And so, what you are seeing, that first set that we just walked through now, that 1166, is not COVID related. Those, because all the COVID related positions are 1 year only positions. So they were added using federal funds and things along those lines, and then are now ending at the end of this year. And so they're not reflected in that. They're not reflected in the 1166, and they're not reflected in the 1207. So the 1207 is all just what we're envisioning being contractual positions that would, continue from year to year unless there was some form of, a programmatic change or a reduction or something along those lines.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Thank you for that. You guys are doing a really good job at across the board, keeping those two separate, right? The locally funded and the federally. So that's helpful, I guess, just to highlight that again. Okay, good. I'll wait till we get the sum of this, but thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Okay. So that's exactly, I think the superintendent just explained exactly what we've got here. So the number of one time only for FY21. And then we really haven't completed our estimates for FY22 because these are going to be use of federal funds. It's not included in the local budget. And part of that would be our summer school. And we're still determining the number of FTEs that would be specifically associated with that and the learning loss recovery that we'll be doing. So we don't really have firm numbers on what the FTE count would be for that. And we also, I think we talked about that we have a dedicated $300,000 that is an estimate for a dedicated classroom subs. And that's really not something that we typically put into FTEs per se. That's represents just the difference between the cost of using day-to-day subs that are currently locally budgeted and what it would cost to hire dedicated classroom subs, which I think were considered to be effective this year. And that cost, that additional cost, would be federally funded. And that's what this spreadsheet's attempting to explain.
So the 20 positions that are estimated to be in federal funding, those are the custodian positions?
Right now, that's the only number that we have a firm number on.
Those are the same ones that were in there this year, and will be continuing
next year, and will be in FY20, not next year, but FY23 as well.
Yeah. And we do envision adding additional positions here, but those have not been budgeted yet. And in the in the $500,000, I'm sorry, the $5 million of current federal funding that we're looking to use next year that we presented as a part of the budget, which we will talk about again in a minute, there is no additional personnel costs associated with that. Any questions about this?
Don't see any.
So we go back to the memo. The next one is more detail about how the district is planning to use federal funding. And this spreadsheet, I believe we had a little bit earlier. This has been posted, and we reviewed this in one of our meetings earlier, just showing the number of FTEs and the cost and the non-FTE cost associated with what's in the budget. So the blue left side of the screen is the 2.9 million that's in our local budget, the superintendent's proposed budget here. And then this other side, which we're still developing, as the note says here, this is our summer school estimate. This is what we would, the 4.9, almost $5 million, just referred to, for federal funding of new investments. And then this is the grand total of what we have available for funding before the ESSER 3, before this latest one that we just got in. This is pretty much the dedication of the federal funds that have yet to be spent.
Any questions, Adam?
Thank you. Two questions on the federal fund side. One on that integrating innovations. I still don't see anything, even ballparking for the outdoor learning investments on the infrastructure side. Just curious if you could speak to that.
So we don't have. I'm sorry. We don't have anything in this ESSER. This is the second round of federal funding. We are not budgeting anything in there yet. As you can see, we still have about $1 million in this pool of funding that we haven't allocated. Now, a significant portion of that is going to be used for the reopening of schools. As I said the last time that we talked about this, our intent is to, once we have a budget, once we have a position in place to do the outdoor learning work, that we will then programmatically make decisions about what we need in order to advance that work. And so that would either come out of what's left of the $1 million or out of the $17.8 million that are in this next pool of funding.
Got it. So yeah, if this is just ESSER2, I will hold my other question until we're talking about the rescue plan. Thank you.
I have Emily and then Emily.
Ms. Chung, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have a quick question about, I remember at the last joint committee meeting that one of the counselors was kind of concerned about the increase in tax that we were putting on because of the budget. And did we change anything since the last meeting in regards to that concern?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add, since it's I'm up next, I'll just add, Emily, the context is that, our job as a school board is to respond to the need within our district, right? And so this budget I think does a pretty good job articulating the needs that we have, really first flowing from equity. And our work with the council is then, navigating through the process of actually getting the council then to hopefully buy into the needs that the school district has. So that was just an initial conversation that will continue as we move through our process. But, their job, we have a different role to play than they do. And so I think for our purposes, it's really important to stay focused on what our need is as a district.
Thank you for clearing that up. I know when we were at the last meeting, it was something that was interesting to see like their perspective, because like you just said, they have like a different role or responsibility in this whole thing. So thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Figdor. I took the sort of the straight answer the question instead of take opportunity to use it as a teaching moment. So I appreciate you doing that.
And Emily, it's possible that we move forward this budget tonight and we meet with them next week. And, it's possible at some point in the process, they say like, no, what you're telling us the school district needs is not what our city can, what our taxpayers can afford. But that's down the road. And again, our job is to articulate what our district needs. And I think we're in a great position with this budget because the needs are so well articulated, and so we're in a place that I think it's it's a very strong budget because it does such a good job building from all the work that we've been doing around equity. My questions are, and I'm really sorry, they're very detailed, but I don't, this last column, which I don't, might be outside the range of, or maybe I'm looking at a different version of this slide on my own computer.
No, that's fine. Yep, the tax impact.
Yeah, I don't understand the tax rate impact federal funding only. That the header there is confusing me, and so I'm not understanding.
I know that's like a worksheet. I'm so sorry, and so I asked Ian, but I think I was too late to remove that column from this. So when we send it, we'll fix that so that this isn't showing. But what that's showing is just what the tax impact of each project would be.
But how does the federal funding?
It does.
It doesn't.
What it would if it were not coming.
What it would, yes, what it would be if it were included in the local budget.
Okay.
That would be the dollar impact.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, and again, I'm so sorry, I'm like just dense here and not understanding the subtotals column in Peach next to the grand totals. Can you just articulate what that subtotal is?
Oh, you know what? We were trying to tie back to all the narratives that we've put out. So we did a narrative for each one of these. We did it for the budget, the local budget piece, and we did it for the federal side, the federal narratives. And we were trying to tie back to the total of the narrative. So the subtotals, like for just the special ed program support, included these three components, but in total it was 580. It's just making sure that everything tied back to the pieces. So for that, that narrative there, it would, that would all tie together. There are a lot of moving parts to this, and it's been changing as we work through this. So we're just trying to make sure we're always tying back to what we have for the latest numbers. So I apologize for that. There's a lot of activity here, but
I just want to make sure I fully understand it. So thank you so much.
Any other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay. So let's see. This is the next item is just the budget comparative information that we went through. We just have a PDF to provide, which does not include all the staffing slides, all the detailed staffing slides that we necessarily had, but all the other comparatives to our peer group. Anybody want to see that? I can click on it, but
I think the board is, the
familiar with that. Yeah. Okay. And then the next one is information on, did I miss one? I think I might have. Did we do this one? I don't think we did this one.
I think the third bullet.
Yeah, I think I missed this one. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So this one was showing, I think they were asking about what our baseline budget might have looked like for an increase compared to the 5%. And we had actually done some work around that. And it's just showing the budget components for the baseline budget, what we talked about initially, and then what it looked like after we added those specific prioritized investments to the superintendent's budget, which was presented. And so we had a 5% increase after.
So this is what Mr. Rodriguez was asking about is
Okay.
what is the sort of the detailed breakdown of what went of what our increase was pre-investments and post-investments. So I think, you know, as a finance committee, you've seen all of this because we had gone through the original increase prior to my budget presentation, and then you've seen obviously the since my budget presentation when we added the $2.4 million in investments.
And so this 2.9 million ties to the investment schedule in the previous slide that we were looking at. And I think this was supposed to be presented first and then the investment slide so that you could see that. But it was showing that initially we were at a 2.5% increase without having added anything. And I think that's what they were asking.
Any questions on this one, Adam?
Just a favor moving forward, Kathy, if you could just zoom to 150.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
That would be really helpful.
I'm so sorry. Yes. I also have a habit of moving things around, so I'll just leave it still, and if you want me to move up or down, I can.
Any other questions on this one? Don't see any.
Just this is a very helpful slide, so thank you. Just a great summary.
That was the 5%, that, what the baseline escalation looked like. And then we did this one, I think the use of the federal funding was the investment summary slide with those showing the 2.9 million that was included in the superintendent's budget version. And then the comparatives, and then a little more information about the impact of increased evaluation, valuation on the tax rate. So not sure how effective this is, but I was attempting, let me zoom, to kind of recap what we had gone over in a previous slide where we had the little, I refer to this as the little house slide, where we have our valuation. This is our current state here. And we used an example of an average home value of $250,000. And we said that with the proposed budget, it would be a 74-cent increase in the tax rate. And for an average home of $250,000, the increase in the tax bill would be about $184. And there was some question about that doesn't appear to really be the average value of a home in Portland right now, and we are going through a valuation, or will be. So really, the amount of money that we need to raise for property taxes on the city, on the school side, is going to be the same regardless of the city valuation. But this will show the impact of an increase in city valuation and tax rate. If we moved this, I actually moved this to 11.1, which is the state equalized valuation. So if, just as an example, if the valuation increased to what the state equalized valuation is for our not federal funding, our state funding, the tax rate would actually go down. The valuation or the property tax base would go up. And then this slide is attempting to show that for a homeowner to maintain the same tax bill, their valuation, the value of their home could go up to $340, and before they would see an increase in their tax bill.
To $340,000. So
what did I say? Yeah, I don't know what I said. 340,000. Yes.
340,000. So a home that was originally valued at $250 could be valued at $340,000, and there would be no increase in that homeowner's tax bill. Even with our 6.29% increase as we're showing it now. Of course, just a couple of things. This is a simulation, right? So
right.
We won't know what the valuation of the city will be after the reassessment is done. Presumably be close to what the state's valuation is. At least clearly a lot closer than it currently is. Mm-hmm. So this, in this scenario, we talked about what would we do, what could we come up with, and so we just decided to use the state's valuation to be able to show this. But I think the things that are important, I think, for the public to understand is, obviously one, that there's a huge gap between the city's valuation that they use for taxes and what the value of property in the city is. And then I think the other one is that I think even counselors, I wasn't clear that everybody fully understood, that we can expect the tax rate to decrease, period, and decrease substantially if the valuation goes up as large, as much as it does in this scenario. So I think it's important for people to remember that we're not going to raise additional money when the reassessment is done. We are still going to need enough money to fund our budget of, $125 million. And so that's not going to change. So what will change is the, where it comes from in terms of how it gets distributed across the city. And, what will also change is that the tax rate will actually, be adjusted to generate just enough money to be able to fund what the voters ultimately approve.
I see Aura and Emily have their hands raised. Aura, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Superintendent, I think from what you just said, I understand that with the revaluation, it doesn't change, right? What the revenue coming in, and it's more just how that would be distributed. But I'm just curious, and I don't know if this has come up, but do we know where that process is, what the timeline is, if, as taxpayers are asking us about that, just where the revaluation process is in the city right now?
Yeah, my understanding is that in May, the city will send out a preliminary assessment to homeowners. There will be an informal, the way it's been described to me by the city manager, an informal appeal process that will be to the company that they contracted with to do those assessments. That will run its course over the summer, and then in September, the council will set a tax rate based on what the assessment is at that point, and send out new tax bills. And at that point, there will be an official appeal process for taxpayers. Based on what their actual assessed value is, and the tax rate that the city committed to, and then that's when people will be able to formally appeal that.
Okay, so then for our process, we really won't, I mean, we're going to be going through this whole process, and the community is going to be voting on this budget before that's even moved along. So I guess I'm just trying to understand how, I mean, it's hard, I see you're trying to give examples, right? Because if people have questions, we can't really answer those accurately, correct? Without that process having gone through, right? Is that kind of where we're at, as we just are making guesses about it at this point? And
yeah, I mean, they're educated guesses.
Yep.
We didn't just come up with a number off of that.
Yes, right.
Based on what the state has valued real estate, real property in Portland. So that's what we used. And, presumably it will get, close to that. So if it's higher than that, then this example would change, and that the home could actually be worth more, and still come up with that, that tax, the same tax amount. And if it's lower, then it will obviously be, it would be the value of a home to generate the $3,100 that a $250,000 home currently generates would be a lower number.
Okay, so I think just my one last question, and anybody who's gone through this process, well, I guess the board hasn't gone through the revaluation process, but I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the council members may be also not knowing how that's going to play out till September. Like, I guess I'm trying to understand how they are grappling with that revaluation piece while looking at this budget. Can anybody help me with how that might be part of this? I'm just a little unclear.
I'm confused too, because aren't the homeowners going to get their new valuation in May? And
it would be a preliminary valuation.
Preliminary. So they're going to get the new value of their home, but they're not going to get an estimate of their taxes. Right. Okay. Because we don't know what they are. Okay. Got it. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
This is conjecture on my part. I would guess that they will probably get something that says, this is your valuation. If the tax rate remained at where it is today, it will be this, which that's what will be shocking to many people. But I think it's important for us to go through this exercise so that, that you, the council, and the community understand that will only materialize if there is no decrease in the tax rate. But there's, and we have looked back at what happened in 2006 when the previous reassessment happened, and the tax rate drop was more significant than what you see here. So, so I think it's important for people to understand that when they get a tax bill that says your home that used to be worth $250,000 is now worth, $340,000. And if the tax rate were the same, it would be your taxes would actually be, probably 4,000 or something along those lines. That is assuming that the tax rate were to stay flat, stable, which it won't as long as the valuation goes up.
So are they definitely going to include that sort of if language?
I don't know.
Okay. I hope they don't, because it seems misleading.
Yes.
Any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, Adam and I have our hands raised.
Yep. Emily and then Adam.
Couple things. First, I wonder, I don't think there's a good understanding of this concept that is very clearly articulated in this slide. And I'm wondering if we could create some, uncomplicated talking points to help that we can use as a district broadly, board, our communications team, administrators, etc. Because even just the conversation with our colleagues on the council, I'm not sure that that they grasp the full picture. So if we could come up with some quick talking, not quick, there's some non-complicated talking points, I think that would be very helpful. Second thing is I've two more things. I'm wondering if we could reach out to Chris Huff, the tax assessor. Assessor is that, I believe that's
assessor. Yeah.
And ask him what if he can share with us what he believes the full valuation will be, because I know he was, he attended one of our BFOF calls and we were chatting on the call, and he looked up during that call what Reiki was going to be assessed at. So that data appears to be at his fingertips. And I wonder if it's something, rather than, because the city uses a different methodology than the state, I wonder if we could get the actual figure from him. Again, I'm not, fully apprised of their process, so maybe that's not possible, but it seems worth asking. And then lastly, could you share the historical data? So just looking back, looking back to 2006 and even earlier, what the tax rate was and the valuation, so we can have that historical data as we're looking at this.
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Adam?
Thank you. This is really helpful. I'm glad you used that valuation number to demonstrate that. I understand it's a educated hypothetical right now, but for me, it does a couple things. One, it illustrates how the city valuation is hurting us right now, because even though the state isn't using 11 billion for our current EPS, it's using almost a 2 billion more in what its valuation is. And so, and our current mill rate's like 23. So if we get our city valuation up closer with the state's using it and deals with that gap of us saying, well, the state's funding us less, and it's hurting us because we haven't dealt with the valuation to do exactly what's been described, which is raise the total amount of what's available to be raised through taxes and then distribute it more equitably, really, right? And so first of all, that's really helpful. And it's helpful, one, to demonstrate the harm that our local valuation is actually doing in this regard. And secondly, it addresses the fear problem, right? Like myself as a homeowner, I've been very fearful of what's the valuation going to mean. I know houses around me are selling for way more than what I paid for, and they're prices I could never afford. And so what's that going to mean for me as someone that's still like clinging on the middle class? Like, can I stay here? And so this says to me that, one, my taxes might very much go down. And if they don't, it's not because the tax rate can go down. So that just sounds good. But then when I see how it plays out in terms of the numbers that you have on the bottom row here, I see it's still a very doable difference for me. Even if my house was to jump up, here it's a $90,000 difference, right? To even see an increase. That gives me totally different information than what I had before this conversation of what the city valuation process might mean for me personally. And it helps me deal with like the case studies and archetypes that we often talk about in terms of who this might affect and who we want to protect. So thank you very much for this. Very helpful.
I'm glad it did that. That was the purpose of it. And Kathy did a brilliant job of, being able to represent that in a way that that I think is very helpful. I know it was, I understood it conceptually, but actually being able to see it in terms of the value of homes, I think that was really great, Kathy. So thank you.
And I do think like the conventional wisdom in the past has just been that typically when you have a reval, a third of the population, their rates could, their tax bill could go down, a third would go up, and a third would stay the same. And that's typically what if you research the.
Right, but things are so crazy. I don't know which third I would fall into,
Exactly.
So at least this gives me an illustration that there's a couple categories I could be in, and I'm still okay. Like life goes on for me without a problem.
But even more than that, Kathy, isn't this is suggesting that the value of your house, if the city valuation is approaching the state valuation, the value of your house would have to go up, more than $90,000 in this example, in order for you to be in the category of paying increased taxes. So I wonder if do you know in 2006 how big that variance was in the valuation before? And I wonder, because we haven't done revaluation for so long, are we seeing is the variance, is the increase so big that actually that one third like rule of thumb might not hold because
right. That's exactly right. But typically that was the rule of thumb. Whether that still holds, I'm not sure. But I think the assessor would know a little bit more.
Emily, to your question, in the data that we have, which we will share with you, which shows the tax rates, we don't have the actual assessed, the value of the total value of assessed property at that.
See it?
We don't actually have that.
This is some of it right here. Can you see this?
We'll have to blow it up.
I can blow it up. Can you see it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, not that much, huh? Look. Let's see if we
can you show that 100 times?
Yeah. Let's see.
Kathy, can I ask you one question as you're working on this, showing us this chart, which is, how do TIFs come? The council has really, I think, been aggressive in pursuing TIFs, and I'm wondering how that affects this picture. Are we going to capture less value because of the TIFs and therefore bring in less, fewer taxes to help us actually raise the money to pay the budget?
Typically, I believe that's how that works, but I'm certainly not an expert. So, and I didn't really have time to reach out to the assessor before tonight. So I probably wouldn't want to opine on that right now, but typically that's what it does typically.
This is tremendous information. So thank you.
So can you walk through what they're looking at, Kathy?
Sure. So this left side here is the city side. This is the school side. This is combined. And this is just like showing in FY06, 2006, what it basically just showing what the tax rate decreased because of a valuation. And it's only, not much changes as far as like what we needed here. This is what we needed to, for property taxes. This is what was levied for the school department. That doesn't necessarily change. It's just the tax rate that changes. And the valuation, which as the superintendent mentioned, is not reflected on the schedule. That would be helpful to see that. But
what you were highlighting though was the combined, Kathy. So the middle stream of columns are the school district ones.
Yeah, I know it's hard to, this is a huge schedule, so I have to, that's not going to help. I have to reduce it to get the column. Well,
we'll send it. It's actually quite it's quite interesting to look at. I think there's a couple of things that I'll just highlight quickly is, when you think of where our taxes are today and you look at the historical level of taxes. So, to put it in context, a combined tax rate now is 23 something. And there have been times going back where it was significantly higher than that. And, in fact, in 2006, when the tax rate dropped, it fell below that. Before that, it was, it was higher than that. And, if you go back historically, there's, times that it was 30 and things along those lines. So
35 looks like.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's just showing the percentages. That's the tax rate, the percentage of city, percentage school, which has pretty much stayed steady. Kind of tip the scale here a little bit, but we're usually around, half and half.
I appreciate seeing this. If I may just come in off mute, just because it was also, and we didn't look at it specifically tonight because we have looked at it so much, the comps against our geographic and other peers, just to see where we land in that regard. So to see this comparison against ourselves also helps me understand kind of the median place that we're arriving with this budget. I know that 6% seems like, whoa. And then we talk about, well, we didn't even increase the school side last year. And then we're still not even caught up with our peers. We're in the middle. And so seeing this just also lends that kind of wider view analysis of things.
Yeah, this is really interesting data. Any more on this before we move on? I don't see any more hands.
Okay. Move this over. Let's see, the next couple of slides speak to enrollment in the facilities study. So let me go back. I'm sorry, let me go back.
Do those, Kathy. So here what we had questions about our enrollment, and we've included the links to what you are already aware of is in the budget book that shows the, our projected enrollment for this coming year from two different vantage points. So if, our enrollment were to return to its previous form prior to COVID, as well as what the enrollment would be if it just, if our numbers as they are today rolled over. But, we also included in there the 2019 enrollment facility study projection. Because I think the important thing that you can see from that is that our October 2019 enrollment numbers were exactly, I don't want to say exactly, but very, very close. I think they were off by 6 from what was projected by Davis Demographics when they did the enrollment and facility study projections. And our projections using if our numbers were to roll over from, where they were, the previous year, so just moving up, they would be also within 5 of what Davis Demographics projected. So, the point is that, that number that that we've looked at that just says this is what our projections are based on the number of kids that we have this year in COVID is not representative of what we actually expect to have. So, we've included that. I also have contact with Davis to do a different analysis based on the different conditions that we're under today than we were 3 years ago when they did the last set of projections. But for those who weren't on the board, then just know that enrollment and facilities study looked at it was actual 2018 all the way through projected 2025, and basically saw our enrollment would remain largely steady. I think that over the 7-year period, there was an increase of 100 students that was projected to be our enrollment. And so, we were holding very true to those projections for 2019 and for 2020. And then, obviously with the pandemic, things went in a different direction. So.
I don't actually know what pages those are on, so I'm not going to keep scrolling through the document. But
so in the enrollment and facility study, page 33 actually has the reported and projected counts. So you actually have that right there.
Page 33.
There it is. So if you look at the column that's I guess it's the second set of data points. So the first one is each grade, and the second one is sort of totaled. So you can see the fourth column in that second table is the total number of students that are projected. In the second subtable there, Kathy.
Right here, yes.
So if you look at the what's there for school year 2020 and school year 2021, those numbers are, match almost, to T with our actual numbers.
I don't know where those are.
You just
right there. Right here.
Adam?
Thanks. So just toggling back and forth between those. So with the fiscal year 22 projections, you have two scenarios, and basically they lie on either side of the Davis projection as I'm reading it. Is that right? Which, yeah, makes sense.
They're close to the Davis projections. If you look at the second set of projections, which is if we have what we projected in 21, rolling over into 22, that would, those numbers would match up with Davis very closely.
Right. Yeah. For the projection 2, and projection 1 is the conservative pandemic affected number, right? Yeah. Trending off of that. Yeah.
Roberto?
Thank you. Are the bottom subgrabs, those are also projections for the number of special ed students? How did those projections hold up?
I did not look at those. I believe, if I have to go back and look, but I believe that those numbers, those are not our special ed numbers. Those are the numbers of special ed students who are, I don't remember if those are state agency clients that are in our district, or if they're students that are in our enrollment that are outside of the district. So they're in residential placements or something along those lines. So I can go back and look at it. Now would not be the right time for me to do that, but I can answer that question for you, Mr. Litigas. But that's not the number of special ed students. That's just those.
Yeah.
It's a special subset of special ed students. I just don't remember which one.
Yeah, it seems like a small number. Yeah, I appreciate it. Just so we can know, we know what those numbers are.
Any other questions on this before we move on? Not seeing any.
Okay. So then I think our last one, did you want to address the procurement policy, or that's just linked to you for information, or?
So I think it was Councilor Zarro asked questions about how much of our investment stays local. And, obviously we don't have a way of managing that, but I do think that the issue that underlies that is, are there any ways in which we direct our dollars to local vendors? And, the point here is that we follow the city's procurement policy. So if there is a set aside or something along those lines at the city level, then we would obviously follow it. And to the extent that there isn't, then we don't follow that. So I did ask our attorney to take a look at the city's procurement policy and get back to me with an analysis of what exists there in terms of local preferences, local set asides, and so on.
I don't see any questions.
And then I believe the last item was just our debt service schedule. And I think this is going to look pretty tiny. But from a distance, these are basically all the bond issuances that we have for the school department. And I'm going to blow these up in just a second, but the blue are all local, meaning that they're not state reimbursed. And it shows, and I'll blow it up a little bit, but just from a distance here, you can kind of see when things are falling off the schedule here. And this will be our combined by year, what our combined debt payment would be. And then the last four columns are just, the last three columns are adding the BFOF projects for Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki as an estimate of what those payments would look like, just so we get a sense of going forward. And let me blow that up now. We have the totals here. And then we're basically, there's nothing scientific about the projection. It's really based on the issuance from Lyseth, having spoken to Brendan at the city, because the costs of the renovation costs are pretty much all within a similar price range. But this is what our projected debt payments would look like in the next few years. This first year being FY21, I believe. Yes. To just give us a sense of when things are falling off, what might be coming on. This is kind of our worst case scenario here. If these three issues are done at the same time, which I believe the work is expected to start, but as Brendan explained too, they need some cash flow projections for these to really come up with more accurate numbers. But for right now, we can kind of see that the next few years will be quite high, and then our pension bond kind of falls off and we come back down, but still higher than we would be without the new 3 projects.
Emily?
Thank you so much for this, Kathy. Is it possible to add, like a few earlier fiscal years to this so we can get a sense of more of the context for these, for the totals over the next, few years? So, like, if we included,
I was hoping I'd get something from issuance, from the date of issuance through, but we got it from 21 on. But yes, I think we can definitely, that's all available.
Okay, thank you.
I was just thrilled to have gotten this.
I know it's very hard to get.
We may not have it at the detail, at the same detail, but we could definitely do the school total.
I think that's all that actually, that all I'm looking for is just a few years back of the total. So we have more of a sense of what our baseline has been prior to the BFOF. I think that would be quite helpful.
Yeah. So I think Kathy hit on one of the key points. I think that is important for you and the community to understand. And one is the pension obligation bond rolls off, and I believe that's 26. And so at that point, we go back to a fairly steady to where we are today. I think the other key point that she hit on is the fact that this basically assumes that all 3 of the projects are going to get bonded in the same year, which doesn't necessarily, even though we are doing all 3 projects, in terms of bidding, they're all starting at the same time. As Brendan said, once we have a better sense of what the cash flows are, he'll make some decisions around should we, bond 2 now and wait and do the other one when we actually need it, as opposed to bonding all 3 of them at the same time and doing that. And then there was another key point that I wanted to highlight, and I can't think of what it was, so it'll come back to me maybe.
One thought too is that the later years that, where we see a decrease significantly, will probably be adding to that. So
yes, I would say so. Yeah.
It's not as accurate of a...
That was the other point that I wanted to make, that, this does not show any of the, if you go all the way to the left, Kathy, to the school regular, school regular column, that's our CIP debt service, and that will continue to build up, because as some things roll off, some other things will be put on there, and so that number will not. That's what's bonded today, but there will continue to be new issuances against that line that will continue into the future.
Emily?
I have a perhaps ignorant question, so my apologies for this ignorant question. But the school central office portion, kind of in the middle there,
that's coming off.
That's coming off. So, yeah, I mean, it's relative to the BFOF. It's a small amount, but we're not those. We're currently including those in the total, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it would adjust the numbers slightly in our towards having less debt.
That's right.
Okay.
And there will also, in theory, there will be a capital infusion from the sale of that property.
And do we, how much of that do we, does the city get to dictate versus do we get to dictate?
It all goes into the municipal funds. So we won't actually get our own separate checking account with that amount of money, but that will be credited to the city. The city will have X number of dollars more as a result of our sale of that property.
And the proceeds would go to pay off the debt.
So, I mean, I think that's an that's a point that we should continue to raise with the city as we're talking about the increase in debt service that we have over the next few years, because that the money that we raise from selling the property will help.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the city, I've had that conversation with John and he understands that. So
I'm not sure that all the councilors are fully aware that we plan to sell central office.
Well, since we just announced it on the 16th, I don't think that they are. So, yeah. But we've talked in the past about the possibility of selling that building, and at that time, we've always understood that it's not like we get the money, but that is credited to the city's accounts. And so anything over what we owe on the building would be, an additional, would be additional money in the city's coffers.
Yeah, and I wonder if we talk about it even more aggressively as part of a strategy to, and because it is, right? We saw the ability to do it through COVID, right? But we've been working towards seeing if we could, sell that building as a strategy to reduce our budget. So I think we shouldn't just let it happen, but we should talk about it as a proactive strategy that we're using, and talk about it in the context of debt service as well, because it comes at a time when we're going to see a big bump in our debt service.
Yeah. But I think our main purpose in showing this was directly in response to Councilor Dion's questions about, what is the impact of the for-school bond, and, to sort of also talk about that as this is, the net effect of the for-school bond, and this is what the taxpayers of Portland voted for when they approved that bond. So
these are the increases that they were taking on as part of that referendum process.
That's right.
Adam?
Thanks. Two thoughts. One, I just wanted to comment when we're talking about the sale of the building that I appreciate that you thought about the opportunity to do that now as compared to what we had heard previously about what it would take to sell and move out of the building, and that it's just one of the ways in which we're trying to use the experience of the pandemic to take the good things and move them forward and keep doing good work, and hopefully continuing to meet our constituents' needs even better if we're in that distributed pattern. On the debt service, I just want to say that I appreciate this tiny chart, and the look ahead with the worst case scenario on what how the bonds could land. The pension, of course, is a an issue that affects both us and the city side of the budget. And when I've looked at both, we're up to 300%. When I've looked at both at the city debt obligations and the school obligations, and considering that we're both generally, close to a 50% of the total city budget, in recent years, the city's definitely carried upwards of twice as much the debt service that the schools have. And it seems like that was coming to be more even. And then as Councillor Dion reminded us, that the public voted for, approved, and collectively took on overwhelmingly the debt that it takes to do the four-school bond. So even as that, we can see that that's going to have an impact. There's not anything here out of whack when I think of that analysis of how much each side of the schools in the city carry within the total budget. And when I carry that analysis through at the debt side of the budget, it continues to stand up. So thanks for continuing to break it down. Much appreciated.
So I think that's all that we had.
Yes.
So I guess first, is there anything that you recall that we heard and we've not addressed through this? And then, our plan is to send this as a memo to the city manager and ask that he include that in the in the communication going out to the city's finance committee ahead of next week's joint finance committee meeting. And then we would plan to sort of put some of this into a slide deck that we would walk through with the counselors at the meeting next Thursday. And that's kind of the way that we're thinking about it. So any ideas or suggestions on that? Obviously, we've got a number of things that came out of today, some of them to strengthen this, and some of them just additional questions that you've asked that we've also, endeavor to get you answers to.
Adam?
Yeah, thanks. I've been thinking a lot about the book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, throughout this, and thinking about how our job as elected officials is to do some of the slow work, and also to continuously think about how that translates to what the folks that we represent are going to hear and how they might react, knowing that the ability to spend the incredible amount of hours that we do processing this information, that's on top of the incredible amount of hours that you as staff have put forward. There's just discrepancies there. So I appreciate that you, one, keep fielding and doing the deep work and analysis to look at what we're proposing, keeping the moral compass straight, but also taking it through the financial analysis that's necessary for multiple reasons. And I think what we just walked through here tonight, plus some of the things that we highlighted, really takes care of some of those thinking fast moments, like when we hear about the tax increase, but then when we think about it more slowly across all those other things, we can see a different picture and we can understand it differently. And it's important for us as elected officials to do that work. And I hope that we can communicate effectively to those that don't have the time, nor should they have to necessarily process all that information at the lengths and depths that staff and we are attempting to right now. So I'm just offering that as a frame of how I'm thinking about things, not new information or glorious insights.
Yeah, that's super helpful, though. I do think that's, I think, the thing that I puzzle over all the time is how do you communicate this, incredibly complex stuff that just takes hours to generate, and then, hours to explain, and how to do that when people have half a second for you. So I think, to Emily's point earlier about how do we get some bullet points that everybody can use to communicate that is, it's the right question, and it's a daunting challenge because we obviously haven't found it yet. But that's the work that we need to do.
Roberto?
Yeah. Just want to say that I think that this is your plan and how you expect to present it seems appropriate, and all the slides seem to address the questions pretty thoroughly. Great way to present and visualize, again, complicated stuff. If I could just offer one, and I think this is building off of what Adam was just saying, and the superintendent, I hope it is building off of it constructively. Often when these questions or these requests are made for presentation to be, put forward in such a way, those questions are framed as with an interest to be transparent. And I think what's important is that none of these slides and none of these individual ways to dissect our budget individually are what's going to give you a transparent view of the budget. But collectively, I think they start to then give you a broad sense of what we're doing here. And so we want to really be careful, especially when we try to sum things up from a holistic level, right? When we try to say, what's the total sum of new positions? That's not necessarily a transparent way to discuss the budget. That's actually a very, that if anything, that lacks transparency. That's a very broad and kind of big level view. So we want to be careful in projecting that information as this is what transparency means. It's not the collective of all this information, which is why the charter includes these joint meetings, right? And why there's a need to be collaborating with them, or rather that's the interest or the intent of it. So anyways, just wanted to put that forward so that we're careful in how we present these slides, and that we always keep forward. Because again, what's the theme of our budget, right? We're advancing equity. That's transparent. So just wanted to put that forward. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that? I agree with both of those sentiments from Adam and Roberto. I think not only do we have just a half a second to present to the council, but also we're up against sort of a way of doing things that has existed for a long time, and sort of being able to take a fresh look at the data is hard. I think there's, kind of a language that has been developed historically about how we talk about the budget, and this is the way we get through it every year, and these are the particular numbers that we look at, and so trying to kind of bring the actual data to the surface to get a fresh look at it is a challenge. Emily?
Yeah, that's why I also think it's important that we are clear that what we're doing, what we have been doing, if we just keep doing the same thing, we're failing large swaths of, sorry, I can't say that word tonight, of our kids, and be specific about the kids that we're failing. We're failing kids of color. We're failing kids living in poverty. And if we just keep doing what we've been doing, we'll continue to not provide the education that kids in Portland need. So, someone can remind me what the quote is of, like, if you do the same thing over and over and you get the same outcomes. This is about actually, in a big, meaningful way, starting to pay back our education debt and address the very real equity challenges that we had before the pandemic and that have only gotten greater throughout the pandemic. So I think I appreciate your sentiment, Anna, that, this idea that, we're just kind of doing what we've always done. It's hard to break that, but I think we need to be forceful in saying we're not okay with the status quo. The status quo is not working for several different populations of kids in our district, and we're at a breaking point with that. We're not going to continue with the status quo.
Emily, and then Adam.
I just wanted to add on to what Ms. Vigdor was just saying about the status quo and us making up that debt, the education debt. And I guess one of the takeaways that I had from the last meeting was that the city council, it really is their job to please constituents in a certain way, and they just have different responsibility than the school board does. And sometimes it can be really easy to really look at all these numbers and really just see them as numbers rather than the actual impact it'll have on students that this funding will do, especially to the ELL program and just everything around equity. And when I'm thinking about debate, we have the logos, the pathos, and the ethos, the different ways to persuade people, and how we've really hit the logos and the ethos, I think. But pathos about appealing to people's emotions is if we could talk about the stories or anecdotes of these programs and the actual impact that they've had on students. If we were to bring a teacher who's in charge of the ELL program at one of the high schools or middle schools and show the impact that it has on these students, where they come and how it helps them grow as learners. I feel that might be helpful for the budget or for the presentation.
Ms. Chung, I'll just say that was your teachable moment to those of us, others of us on the board. So thank you so much. That was awesome.
Great. Adam?
I want to build a little from what Ben said, and I'm thinking back to the little house slide and what that hypothetical really illustrated. And that really what it illustrated to me. Could you mute whomever's unmuted in there's feedback? Sorry. Thanks. The status quo is about to change, and it's about to change to be more equitable through the valuation system, unless that turns out to be false in terms of the third premise of what's going to happen there. And so to say that we can't invest this money, if this is what we were going to say or anybody's going to say, we can't invest this money to quo that is failing our kids, particularly BIPOC students and our poor students. What we're saying is we can't invest this money because we're prioritizing the wealthiest of our residences more than them. That's what that clearly says to me. Because unless I hear a thesis or a proof that disproves what we just saw in that house slide, that's what would be being said. So I stand firmly committed to this budget as you put forth, and I think it's justifiable morally and financially for the majority of people that live in Portland, and those that seem to be poised to take impact of this increase are our wealthiest residents, and I think that is more than fair.
So I think that actually kind of segues into our next item. If we just want to kind of debrief, recap, any thoughts on the Joint Finance Committee meeting? Anybody want to jump in with that?
Do you need a motion? So moved.
For what's so moved? I guess it's just a discussion item. I think my thought with the Joint Finance Committee meeting, it actually went more smoothly than I expected. I felt that there, obviously some counselors did raise concerns about, whether we can afford this increase. But I didn't feel that there was any sort of majority directive to ask us to, bring down the tax increase or anything like that. And I found that some of the newer voices were kind of helpful in the in the council debate and kind of reframing the way that the budget has typically been talked about. And I mean, to me, I definitely feel comfortable. I feel like this budget, just like Adam said, is totally justifiable. And my thought is that we just go forward recommending it as is tonight to the full board. And then, of course, we'll have a second joint finance committee meeting, and then we'll make a recommendation to them. So there's still a little bit of process ahead of us, but those are just sort of my thoughts at the moment. Roberto, and then Adam.
Thank you. Anna, I would agree with much of what you just summarized. It was generally, I would say, a positive reception to the proposed budget. I think, as I said before, a lot of the questions and the information that was requested, I interpret that as an effort to be transparent, and a lot of that information does allow or rather meet that requirement of people as what transparency is on a budget. So I expected that, so to speak. But what did stand out, or perhaps I read into it more than I should have, but what is clear to me, particularly when I add reflection on what last year's budget was like. Last year's budget, obviously I'm not the senior most member in this committee, but I've gone through 5 budgets just like Javier, and I would say that what we experienced last year, that last minute kind of like pivot and change directions, and the way that we did that in discussion with the city, with our counterparts, I think that was acknowledged. I think that, and the fact that we passed a 0% increase, tax increase through our budget, I thought that was acknowledged as well. And then this year, honestly, if you look at the 2 years averages, we're passing like a 2% increase here, So this is, I think that this was part of their discussion, and it's inevitable that some people are going to be concerned about taxes. That's a general, very high level theme, or rather rhetoric that people have when we discuss budgets. It's a lack of transparency, very superficial way to discuss budgets. When we talk, as we've been doing over the last 2 years, what these investments include and the equitable changes that we're trying to advance, the LAO plan investments, our outdoor learning opportunities, then we start talking about the real value of this budget. So again, I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but I think it is worth repeating. Thank you.
Adam?
Yeah, thanks. First, to clarify, my so moved was I misunderstood what was next. I thought we were going to the vote. I thought it was a healthy and productive conversation, and the process that we're beholden to was doing what it's supposed to do. So I don't have anything else to add there.
Okay. I mean, we can move to a vote if people are ready to do that. Do I have language for a motion?
We don't have proposed language. Sorry.
So I think the language would be that the Finance Committee recommends the FY22 budget in the amount of, and then we list the actual amount to the Board of Education.
I can read you what's going to be the motion for the new for the board meeting, which is exactly what you said. First, read to adopt the FY22 budget in the amount of, and because we don't know what the amount is, because we still didn't have this meeting, right now it just shows a bunch of X's, but I know Kathy knows that number off the top of her head, or if not, she can go back to one of the slides and tell us it's 125. You're muted, Kathy.
Sorry. 125,815,000 $1,760. 125-815-760.
Okay. So I will call for a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend the FY22 budget in the amount of $125,815,760 to the Board of Education. And Adam, should I take your previous as a so moved?
So moved.
So moved by Adam Burke, seconded by Roberto. And do we have any further questions or discussion? I think we pretty much covered it through the course of all of this. So I'm supportive of this budget. I think we all are. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everybody, the entire staff for your work on this. It's continuing work, I know, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate all of your work. So with that said, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the motion, please signify. I guess we can just raise our hands. It is unanimous with Ms. Chung voting in the affirmative. And so I think that concludes. Should we just recap what our next dates are?
Yes, we have a hearing at the board meeting next week, so we will open with that. Immediately following the hearing, we'll go into the business meeting. So the hearing starts at 6:00. We'll go into the business meeting. During the business meeting, there will be a first read of the budget, so there won't be any further discussion or anything like that, since we will just be advancing the budget that you've seen. And then we have a joint meeting with the city's finance committee. So this committee and the city's finance committee on Thursday of next week. Then we also have the board will take a vote on the budget at what is currently scheduled as a special meeting on the 13th, but Chair Figdor and I have been talking about potentially making that the regular second meeting for the month of April, and then not having the meeting on the 27th that we are currently scheduled. I've been reviewing what we need to get done with staff, and should be able to get back to Emily with you on that tomorrow. But so that's kind of what's ahead. Then on the 26th, we present the board presents, so the board president, board chair will present the budget to the city council, and they will have a first read and send it to their finance committee, which I believe meets that Thursday as well. So.
I have a quick question about the meeting next Thursday, the joint meeting. I've been asked if there's a public hearing component of that, and I couldn't recall.
We looked at it. I don't think so, because it is not, but we'll check. So just we'll double check, but they're not voting on anything at that point. So
still informative.
I think it's it's the second review, and then there is a subsequent review on the 29th, which I do believe they will have a public hearing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Out, but I haven't heard back.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Unless there's any further discussion, then I guess I will call for a motion to adjourn. Made by Roberto, seconded by Adam, and all those in favor. And it's unanimous. And we're adjourned at 7:37.